where an experimenter essentially manipulated facial features to find out who looks more trustworthy, because essentially in-person interactions are hugely powerful, but they're not always used for good. Okay? And when you're together with somebody face-to-face, not only their honest signals influence you, but even something like their facial features influence you. And most politicians know this, most scam artists know this. And so as you move along this array, I'll show you, this is an array that they generated of many, many different gradations along the way. But essentially, I'm just showing you slices where there were like 10 gradations in between. The most honest faces are those that are a little feminine looking. Okay? You see this person looks a little bit feminine looking, where they're arched eyebrows as opposed to flat eyebrows, where they kind of have a softer baby-faced look and have a cheerful demeanor. And so people who have that kind of face are more easily elected, and they're better able to pull the wool over our eyes. So it's not as if face-to-face contact is always a unilateral good. For example, these guys who are Ponzi scheme scam artists had those believable faces. Earl Jones is a Montrealer who scammed the Anglo-Saxon upper crust community with his baby face and his participation in community events. He was a hockey coach. He was a church deacon. He did all sorts of great things for the community, and people fell for him. And you can see, there's his arched eyebrows, his baby face, his smiling demeanor. This guy, Salah Ezzedine, essentially bilked